Just a few announcements. Looks like we have a ladies fellowship called Wrinkle Free. It says get ready for a fun-filled evening on January 25th from 5 to 8 as we play our version of Price is Right. Ooh, that sounds fun. And bring in the new year in wrinkle free.
So no pajamas?
No,
Not for this one.
not for this one, probably not. It says bring your favorite finger food.
No, yeah.
So bring your favorite finger food or sweet treat to share. So now this, we're gonna have a 2025 mission trips interest meeting. So on January 26th at 5 o'clock in the chapel, all those who are interested in a mission trip, for anyone wanting to attend any of these, you want to attend this meeting at the chapel at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, if you're thinking about going on a trip this next year with the church, Jay's got some new parameters on how fundraising is gonna work, how the church sponsors you and all these kind of stuff. So he's gonna be going over that, during that meeting.
Then for the students grades 7 through 12, Surge Weekend is coming up on January 31st to February 2nd. This year's speaker is going to be Richard Ross, one of the premier speakers for youth ministry. So let's see. Also, we are excited to welcome Northcrest's favorite people of, hold on, I can't even read, I'm sorry. People of the earth, that's what I thought it said. Back to lead worship with us again. Cost is $30 per student. Please see student pastor Caleb to get the details on payment or care package options. Okay, you can sign up any of the kiosks, and you can pay your registration and buy Surge merch from the Surge store. And we have a really interesting class. So any of those who want to learn how to speak Spanish, so we have the ministry where we help people learn English here. We're gonna flip it. We're gonna learn how to speak Spanish. Jay and Courtney Nelson will be teaching this class. Classes begin February 2nd at 4:30 in the chapel. So that's on Sunday evenings, huh? Sunday
afternoon.
Sunday afternoons,
Before
yeah.
the service. Yeah.
Before the service. So go ahead and please sign up at the kiosk if you're interested in that. It sounds like a good one. Okay, so our question for the day was, who's the funniest person that you know?
I think they'll put my name. I didn't see it, but.
I see Gary. Who's Gary?
Her husband.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm sorry.
Gary.
I'm sorry. He is pretty funny. I like him. Myself or Ember. My
Just keep
old,
talking.
huh?
Just keep talking.
Okay, my old ABA client, Nate Bargetz. Bargetzi, is he a comedian?
He's a comedian.
Okay, he's a
Playing
comedian.
comedian.
Never heard of him.
His Bo's favorite.
Is he funny?
The next break,
Okay.
we have stuff to do. We're gonna go through a Nate Bargatze marathon.
Let's see, me, I put me. Hey, sometimes it's a tough crowd in my household. I mean, I let them, they don't know how lucky they are when I begin. But there's one more. My mom, ooh,
My mom.
my mom,
My mom.
your mom.
Yeah.
She's funny. Okay.
Is she watching? Is that why you put it?
Is she watching? Is that why you wrote her name?
No, she might be, I don't know. She's hilarious.
She's funny.
And hey, we got one for the class, Lalo.
Lalo.
I don't even try to be funny, dude.
Hey, that's it.
That's almost an insult. I'm just being normal and y'all think I'm funny. That's
If
great.
you're not trying to be funny,
I just breathe and y'all laugh at me. I don't know what it is.
well, if you ever stop by our D group class, sometimes it can be like a comedian standoff. Lalo trying to be funny.
Again, not trying, man.
Hey, Dylan's trying to be funny. I gotta throw my humor in there. Tyler just sits back there and laughs at us. So
He gets a free show.
yeah, he gets a free show. So let's go ahead and let's begin jumping in our lesson here today. We're gonna be in Exodus 16, 11 through 19. And we'll also be in 17, 1 through 6. 1 through 6. Kind of have another icebreaker too. Hey, what is a question or an event in history that stumps you? That maybe you have questions about. I got a smile from Harrison. What you got?
Well, I feel like someone's gonna come start espousing the conspiracy theories.
Are you not a conspiracy
I don't got
theorist?
any, but I feel like you got a lot.
Gary does make me watch a lot of podcasts.
So what's an event or maybe a question that maybe stumps you?
I was ranting about how like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth work. That makes no
Hey,
sense.
Yeah.
How does Wi-Fi and Bluetooth work?
How are you touching an iPad there, going into that computer and then
Yes,
showing up
like,
here?
that makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Random, but like how words behind words, like who
Uh,
looked at a chair
Yeah.
and said this is a chair.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anybody else? I know Marion's got one. She's laughing.
How,
Sometimes I'm just so shocked how a plane is in the air. Like, I just don't,
That's a
Actually, a
good
really
one.
big one.
and I'm in there and I'm like, you sure this is going?
I had a question back the other day, like, letter Q. I'm like, why that, you know?
Letter Q, like why is it?
Yeah, like, we were playing the alphabet game on the highway, and I'm like, who comes up, like it's nowhere, like,
Why are they
We can get
called
rid of that one.
Q-tips? Cause why?
yes.
Yeah, that
I don't
is,
know.
I'm with you, Tyler, I feel you.
Or a W and it looks like two V's, that'll make no sense either.
It's a double U.
No, it's
But it
two
looks like
V's.
V's. Well, yeah.
Well, I write mine down.
I realize.
See, so do I, so it
Yeah.
makes sense. But like growing up, it was all printed to two V's.
Double V.
So you know what question that stumps me? Does your stomach think that all potatoes are mashed potatoes?
Oh, I get what you're saying.
Think about it. Think about it, right? I mean, to me, that's, you know, those are some of the things I think about, you know, if you ever wanna get in the head of me, sometimes I'll just come up with, you know, like,
You're right, I think it just picks
cause you
up.
have fried potatoes, you eat them, you have hash browns, it all gets ate, right? Mashed potatoes, they just stay mashed from, okay? So, you know, we always have, you know, some of those are funnies, and we might have some serious ones where we're like, man, you know, like JFK, like, did that even happen? The moon?
how does it matter?
The moon? Hey, there's questions about the moon, you know, stuff like that. But, you know, when we think about who God is, there's not a question about who God is, right? And so we're gonna learn about how God is continuing to reveal Himself to the Israelites, okay? Because when we look at kind of like the context of what's going on now is, okay, they've been delivered, okay? Moses, you know, had his interaction with Pharaoh. We had all the plagues. We had a mass exodus of the people of Israel crossing the Red Sea. Okay, we see the glory of God leading them through fire, through the pillar of smoke. We see God revealing Himself, and there's no question that it was from God, right? There's no question when we read the narrative of the Exodus. There's no question for us, but there was questions for the Israelites. Okay, they had a lot of questions, and so as we get into our lesson today, you know, we see this narrative that the Israelites had. They had questions about who God was, but how God provided for them. There's no question that He loves His people and that He's going to provide for them. You know, last week we ended with the reading of the Psalm. You know, the song that Moses and the Israelites sang, and I just loved how a certain part. You know, I like the whole narrative, but there was a part here in verse 11 that says, "Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? You stretched out your hand and the earth swallowed them. And they were able to get through, In verse 13 it says, you have led in your steadfast love the people whom you have redeemed. He redeemed Israel. You have guided them in your strength to your holy abode. So we see that God is guiding them in this area. So as we get into the lesson today, we're going to see how God provides for His people. Let's see. Did I go back? Okay, yeah. I'm working bows. There you go. Okay, so provision, how God provides here. Can I get someone to read Exodus 16:11 through 15?
The Lord spoke to Moses, I have heard the complaints of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will eat bread until you are full. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. So at evening quail came and covered the camp. In the morning there was a layer of dew all over around the camp. When the layer of dew evaporated, there was fine flakes on the desert surface, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they asked one another, what is it? Because they did not know what it was. And Moses told them, it is the bread of the Lord has given you to eat.
All right, so here we begin the Lord continuing to reveal himself to Moses. So he had this really cool interaction with Moses. The Lord spoke to Moses, okay, and he's speaking to Moses, and he's hearing this grumbling of the people. So I want you to keep in mind, to keep this in the back of your head, the Israelites were grumbling. Why were they grumbling? Do we know why they were grumbling?
Because that's what they did.
Because they're hungry, right? Yeah, it's just what they did. The Israelites grumbled, right? And they grumbled because, one, they were hungry, right? Look what it says here in verse. It goes, I've heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat. So if you look at the beginning of verse 16, even though we didn't read it, the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. So here they were in the wilderness. So if we think about the wilderness, when we think about the wilderness, how would you describe wilderness? How would you describe wilderness? There's nothing there, right? There's nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. I think about the desert.
House, no
Okay.
kitchen to cook in.
Think about the desert. Like, what's in the desert? Huh? Tumbleweeds, right? Cactus. There's really nothing there. There's really no. So we know that the Israelites are in the wilderness. They would have much rather been back in captivity. Why? Because they got their pots of meat. Okay, they got their bread every day. Even though that they were under oppression, they still had a place to lay down, meat, and bread.
They knew what they were gonna get.
They knew what they were going to
their
get.
Comfort zone.
Yep, they were out. So here we have them in the wilderness. And in the wilderness, they looked around and they seen what we seen. When we look around in the desert, what do we see? We don't see anything. We don't see nothing. So we see them seeing not anything. Now, even though, and this is what kind of gets me too, is like, even though we see in this narrative here that the glory of the Lord was in the pillar, was in the smoke, was in the fire, they still looked around. They didn't concentrate. They didn't gravitate toward the glory of the Lord revealing himself. They were more concentrated on what the wilderness was showing them. Okay, and when we think about the wilderness internally here, it begins to wear us down. Like, man, how are we going to eat? How are we going to eat? How am I going to be able to walk through this here and not be able to eat, not be able to drink? Okay, so we're going to see how God provides for them. So we see this grumbling that's going on. Okay, we see this grumbling. It says, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Now, this is a very interesting phrase that I really loved when I was studying this. It says, then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. Then you shall know. So he's talking about God revealing himself. Now we know that one of the most important verses in this whole narrative is in Exodus chapter 6. You don't have to go there, but I'm just going to read it for you. Okay, so this is, if you remember, this is when God is revealing himself, not as El Shaddai, but as Yahweh. He goes in verse 6 in chapter 6, he goes, therefore say to the people of Israel, I am the Lord. Okay, I am the Lord. I am Yahweh. This is what I'm going to do. I will. So he's the great I am, but we have here in my translations, I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. That's what I'm going to bring you out of. That's what he's done here. But here, God has taken them to the wilderness. So maybe the Israelite people are like, man, he's putting more burdens on us because here we are in the wilderness and I don't know what to do. So here, I will bring you out from the burdens of the Egyptians. That's what he did. I will deliver you from the slavery to them. That's what he did. I will redeem you with outstretched arms and great acts of judgment. That's what he did, right? I will take you to be my people. So the Old Testament narrative, you'll always see Israel associated with God's people. You'll always see that. Okay. So it's almost kind of like, so the way the Israelites and how they were redeemed and how they call upon God is, and I don't want you to misunderstand me when I say this. I'm not differentiating who Jesus was and who God was, because we all know that they were united in their purpose. But as Christians, we call upon the name of Jesus, right? Okay, that's where our salvation comes. So in the Old Testament, who did they call upon? They called upon Yahweh. Okay, they called upon Yahweh. So this is what we see here. Okay, I will redeem you with outstretched arms with great acts of judgment. That's what he's done. I will take you to be my people. I will be your God. And look what he says at this. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God. It's powerful. You shall know. So then I think about what Jesus has done for all of us. We can probably go around and each one tell our stories that this is, and we're not differentiating from Jesus and God, but that's who we call upon, right? We call upon the name of Jesus, right, for our salvation. So we see that. So you shall know that I am your God. So here we have Yahweh. God is always making himself known. And this is what he's doing with the people of Israel. So, and he's telling them, you shall know that I am your God. By how? By what I'm going to provide for you. So what's he going to provide for them? So it says in verse 13, in the evening, quail came upon and covered the camp. Now, quail is not a special bird. It's just some of the commentaries that I came across, during this time, they were actually migrating from their place where they were at, and they were just kind of migrating. So quail was actually, one of them said quail was like a delicacy for the Egyptians, okay? But we see quail here, but it's not really, quail is miraculously given to them, but what we really find miraculous is the bread, the manna, right? Why? Because it's coming from heaven. So we see the quail, it came up and covered the camp in the morning, and the morning dew laid around the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was a face in the wilderness, and was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. They've known bread, right? They've known bread. They know what bread is. So when we go to Arizona, so I always talk about fry bread. I love fry bread. Okay, every household in Arizona, or actually on the reservation, they got fry bread. But they not only have fry bread, they have homemade tortillas. They have what they call this like buntana thing. It's called buntana. That's Apache. And what they do is they have this big kind of like wired thing that they put on the fire. Then they put the bread on the fire. Then they flip it. It's really good. Okay, you just have to take my word for it. But we always have bread. There's always bread. There's always bread. So God here is actually he's providing them bread. So we have the quail, but we have the bread. But there's something special about the bread because the bread comes from heaven. There's something special about that bread. One of my favorite stories to tell is, I may have told this before, but so our first year, our camp, we always had food. We always tried to keep food on hand because people always came by, and we tried to feed them. We would feed them. Well, this one particular guy, he was actually bigger than Bo. He was a big guy, and he was probably about 6'. He was probably about 6'6". When I say big, I'm saying 6'6", 6'7". He was a big guy. He stopped by and he goes, "Do you guys have any bread?" I said, "Yeah, we have bread." We hooked him up with some bread, whatever we had some food, we hooked him up and just struck up a conversation with him because he was like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" Well, then I went into, just trying to connect with him. I was like, "Hey man, we're having a service tonight. You're invited. We're gonna feed you again. And we'll feed your family. You don't have to just bring yourself. That's all you gotta do." And I happened to be, I wasn't preaching that night, but I was. It might have been at the beginning. I might have been doing announcements or whatever. But when the sun was coming down, I seen this big figure walking through. I was like, "Oh, he came back." I was like, "Yes, he came back." So he sat down with his family, and I didn't know what the pastor was preaching on. He got up. He started preaching about the bread of life, and I was like, "Yes." And when he got done, he made his call of response. How he responded. Well, all because he came to stop by to get some bread. Okay? That's all he wanted was some bread for him and his family. But he got something greater. He got the bread of life that was preached, and he got that when he came back. And so we know that God is the one that provides bread from heaven. So when we look at Jesus here, okay, when John in John 6, he goes, "I'm the bread of life." He says that in verse 48. He goes, "I am the bread of life." But in verse 35, he goes, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst." They shall never thirst. So when that gentleman came back, man, I thought about it, man, he's never going to thirst. He's never going to hunger. And this is for us too, Yeah, we'll have a physical hunger, but our spiritual hunger, because we have this bread of life, because Jesus was sent down from heaven to be salvation for us, and he died on the cross for our sins, right? So he's the bread of heaven, right? So we see the bread of heaven not only here in this narrative here, but we see it for us in our life. Now he goes, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was, and Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat." He gave you the bread, okay? He provided, okay? Now I want to see if I can play one of these examples here as far as how God provides for us when we do ministry. I want to see if it'll help here.
Right now we're in San Francisco where I live now, and I've been spending a lot of time here because this is where a lot of people are on the streets and big drug problem, everything else. And it's been actually a lot of fun for me hanging out with people that are down and out. See, most of my life I've ministered just to the rich. And the message that God has to them is humble yourself, don't put all your stock on your riches. I'm constantly telling people, look, you're not as great as you think you are. I know everyone worships you, but I don't, and God doesn't. It's a very humble yourself, before the mighty hand of God. But the message down here with those who are struggling is actually a much funner message for me anyways to preach. It's like, no, you're not a loser like everyone tells you are. You're not the scum of the earth. In fact, God is willing to come into your life, and he can actually do huge things in your life. And I just keep praying, going, God, could it be, could you just call some people that are the most unlikely and raise them up to really be your disciples and to make disciples, and it's requiring a lot more faith than it used to be, that I was in a position where I could just call up people because I had resources all around me, but I kind of wanted to come to a place like this where I didn't have a lot of connections, because I had to depend on my prayer life. I have to depend on my prayer life and say, God, if I'm going to have any impact here, you're going to have to do it. And it's kind of nice for me to be completely dependent again. And sometimes you can forget that when you're given a lot of resource, or you're in a position where you're not as needed. And then you go to a place that's so desperate, and you go, gosh, this is impossible. God, the only way I can pull this off is it's going to take a miracle from you. And I guess it's good for my soul to keep myself in a position like that.
So we kind of see the Israelites in a position where they had, they gotta fall into God's hands. They gotta let Him work, and they have to. And even as we do ministries and things of that nature, so he tells us here that, man, he was at a position where, because I think sometimes, I remember Bo telling me this one time. He goes, "Hey, leave room enough for God to work." Okay. Yeah, we can dot the I's, cross the T's. We can try to get everything to go in order, but if we don't leave room for God to work, then we're kind of off kilter on what our message should be. So we see this in the Israelites. We see this in ministry. So when we go to places, we gotta leave room for God to work, because God, without God, we're not going to be able to do some of these things. So we see the Israelites in the wilderness, and we can ask ourselves here, have you ever found yourself in the wilderness of uncertainty and anxiety? How did that experience affect you, and what did you learn about God's character? Now you don't have to. You can kind of group them into one answer that's fine. Have you ever found yourself in the wilderness of uncertainty?
I remember before we came here, we went through a season in our last church where we knew that God was doing something was changing, but He wasn't telling us what it was. And the season lasted longer than we were comfortable with. And so we were wanting answer, like, what are you doing, God? And so in our own ways, we, I think, tried to come up with our own answers to those questions, and then those butted up against each other. They weren't the same. So we were like, okay, God can't be doing this if He's telling you one thing and me and that kind of thing. And so I think we learned through that, sometimes seasons of uncertainty can last a while. Our timeline is not His timeline, but also it required us to be patient and to constantly seek the Lord, to constantly call out to Him and say, okay, I know you're doing something, don't let me miss it. But yeah, but I think sometimes, even in the video, when you have resources and you just kind of know what you're doing and you get into the habit of doing what you know how to do, then when God shakes that up a little bit, it requires you to remember, we can't do this without you, and to be patient. And then He ended up doing something neither one of us had planned. So,
we think about seasons. Have you ever said, we go through winter? We're man, when's winter going to be over with? It should be over February 1st. Winter should be gone, but it lasts all the way to February or March or April. You're like, man, it's a long winter. We'll say it because we're in the South. Man, it's a long winter. But God, what she said is true. Is the seasons. God works in those seasons, and we don't have an idea of how long that season is going to be. Does anyone else want to share? Yes, ma'am.
So I moved here in July. Before that, I was from Illinois, but I lived in Kentucky for 6 years going to college. And I was trying to apply to Mississippi State in Starkville. Accidentally applied here, and so that was kind of an ordeal on its own. But when I got in, I was like, okay, I can go to Mississippi. I don't know, I've never been there. I don't know, I don't have family there. I don't have a job. I don't have friends. I don't have resources. And so like it was really scary, but like it oddly worked out in a way that I've always said it was God, because like I got into a program I didn't even know existed. In the interview I thought surely I was gonna be like discredited, because they were like, you know, you applied to I mentioned research, and this is a PsyD program, which is practical, not research based. And they were like, hey man, you know you applied to the PsyD, and I was like, actually didn't know your program existed. So even by saying that in the interview, I beat over 60% of candidates to get the spot, and I got in. First job I applied to, I got. First department I applied to, I got. And then it worked out really weird that like, so I worked at an ABA clinic before in Kentucky, and I had gotten friended like over a year ago by this person who was like obviously a mom of an autistic boy, and I friended her thinking it was someone from my like nonprofit job. And I got down here, and I was like, first 2 days I was down here, I was scrolling through Facebook trying to find like groups to join, and she was part of it, and I was like, why? And turns out she lived here before I even knew this town existed, and so it was really weird. So.
Does anyone else want to share?
I kind of feel like I'm constantly in that state, though. You know, I mean, I say that to not be cute, but it's just, I feel like God knows that if I'm good, and I kind of I don't
pull up,
you know what I'm saying, and so
go into cruise control.
That's right, and so and in this experience, like he's teaching me like that hope does not it disappoint, like in Romans 5, you know, like, and it's the love of God that's poured out in our hearts, you know, and that's the anchor, you know, of hope, and that helps with uncertainty and anxiety, you know. So that's for me, like in life, you know. But.
Yeah, so you know, we're all, you know, I think throughout our lives, you know, we'll experience God fully, but we'll also experience, you know, certain attributes of who God is. Like you said in verse 6, you know, I'm going to deliver you. You know, I'm going to deliver you. So he's going to be our deliverer. You know, he's going to maybe deliver us from addiction, or deliver us from, you know, a sin, or he's going to be a healer, or, you know, so we see these different attributes. And that's what I love about this narrative in Exodus, is that he's revealing himself over and over and over and over. And I think this is what the Israelites need, because just like we talked about last week, you know, man, these guys were 400 generations and generations and generations of oppression. So we need God. He's constantly making himself known here. So we're going to get into the next part of our lesson here. It's going to be Exodus 16 through 19. Can I get someone to read that?
This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as person needs to eat. As each person needs to eat. You may take 2 quarts per individual, according to the number of people each of you has in his tent. So the Israelites did this. Some gathered a lot, some a little, and they measured it by quarts. The person who gathered a lot had no surplus, and the person who gathered a little had no shortage. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. Moses said to them, no one is to let any of it remain until morning.
So we kind of see our first buffet. Or am I the only one that's seen that? So we see, you know, these instructions by the Lord. So God he's going to provide for us. But when he provides, there's going to be some instruction, right? There's always going to be some instruction, okay? I've always said this. I love the word go in the Bible. He's going to tell you to go. But behind that go, there's always going to be some type of instruction, okay? And so here we see this provision from God. He's providing the quail. He's providing this food from heaven. The Israelites, they're in a grumbled mode. They see, but they're also in a perplexed mode, because they don't know what this bread from heaven is and what it even tastes like. But they see it, right? They see the glory of the God working in that way, and then the Lord comes up with these commands. Gather as much as you eat, gather as much of it as each person needs to eat. You may take 2 quarts per individual, according to the number of the people each of you has in his tent. So the Israelites did this. Why do you think that there's instruction here? Why do you think? Some gathered a little, some gathered a lot. Why do you think there might be instruction here?
God's testing them.
You saying God's testing him?
They're
But what's he testing him to? What do you think he might be?
It's like everybody doesn't need the same amount. And so maybe at this time, one person might have this and another person might have something less, but it's enough for them at that moment that God provides.
I think it's also like a reminder to not overindulge on things, because they were hungry and God just provided them with everything they needed, and it would have probably been really easy to want to have more than what they were just feeling at the time. So it's kind of a reminder, like, don't be a glutton.
Yeah, so we've seen the Israelites, they're told to leave. So they left. They probably left with some apprehension, right? But here we have God giving them instruction, okay? He's giving them instruction. And here, I really think that he's trying to build faith through obedience, okay? He's trying to build faith through obedience here because he's given them instruction. And maybe in the next, when you look down further, in this narrative, you'll see that those who took too much, that there was consequence. It soured. It turned into worms. Okay, so there's in this instruction here, God is asking them to pay attention to the details of the instruction. Get what you need. Okay, now some gathered a lot. Because some needed a lot, man. They probably had more. They probably had big families. Some probably didn't have as many in their families. So some had little. Okay, when they measured it by quarts, the person who gathered a lot had no surplus, and the person who gathered a little had no shortage. Okay, that's an important detail here. The one that gathered a lot, they didn't run out, but the one that had little, it was fulfilling. So each portion here had its purpose. And God knew that because who was providing it? God. He's providing the food for them. So this is what I want you to take. Take this. And be detailed in what you take. And the person who gathered little had no shortage. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. And Moses said to him, no one is to let any of it remain until the morning. That's a detail right there that they needed to understand. That none that was gathered needed to wait until the morning. Because when we look at what happened in the morning, let me look at verse 19, sorry. It says here in verse 19, and Moses said to him, let no one leave any until the morning. But guess what happened? They didn't listen to Moses. Some left part of it till the morning, and its bred worms and stank. And then Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning, I know that I thought that was a weird word too. Morning by morning, they gathered it, each of them as he could eat. But the sun grew hot and it melted. Okay. Here God is the details of what God's instructions was. He's trying to build faith, and he's trying to build it through obedience. Because when I went through boot camp, they always said, be detailed in your instruction, but also be detailed on how you follow those instructions. This is my first year at Russell. I always tell them the same thing. Hey, when I give you the test on formatting, I want you to look at the details of each instruction. Because there's purpose there. Here, there's purpose in God's instruction. We see them. God is actually here to build faith through obedience. So, when we look at our lives here, how does our obedience to God display our trust in Him?
Well, something I saw when I read that, it was like the sufficiency of Christ. It was like he was like, I'm going to supply for today. Like, don't try to stockpile thinking you won't need me tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And don't do a disservice to yourself by not taking all that you need. Like, it's like, I need you to come back to me every single day. So he's providing sufficiency for today, but we need to go every day to be supplied.
Yes, awesome. Anybody else?
Yeah, sometimes we think we know more than God, or we're like, well, he's probably gonna respond this way in like a week or so, and so we might be obedient in a little bit, but then we're like, well, let's just take it a step further. Let me show you my obedience and try to go greater or even more. And he's like, just follow my commands here. Like, I'm teaching you something here, and if you move on too quick, you're gonna miss this part. And so I think a lot of it is just staying in the moment of what that obedience is. Whatever you're praying for, whatever you're seeking it for, just live in that moment and then move on to the next thing, before we can do it too quickly sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know if it was last Sunday or one Sunday you were like, I prayed for something, but then I just did something anyways. I didn't get time to work. And it's like, when you pray for something, give God time, because it's not your time, but we want it right then, or we're fearful that it's not gonna go our way or work out how we think they were scared they weren't gonna have food the next day, and instead of letting God be God, they wanted to, she said, stockpile.
Yeah, the French Chan video, like later on, he has this idea of doing, and Matthew talks about this great banquet that's going to happen in heaven. And so he has this idea, I'm going to invite all the homeless people that we can, everybody, street women, whoever it is, and it's just going to be their day. And so he comes and he feels like this is what the Lord is telling him to do and provide this meal. And like other people are like, well, I have a hair studio, so I can cut hair for people. Oh, we have this. Clothing stores were like, we'll get them fancy clothes and all this kind of stuff. And they got wrapped up in all these other things. And then it got to like the week of, and he was like going through the list of everything. And he's like, where's the food? Like the purpose was the food, and we missed that. And then by that time, they couldn't find anywhere to get enough food for all these people. And so they're like, we just have to pray. And the day before the banquet was supposed to happen, Trader Joe's calls and says, our freezers went out. Can you use this food? And it's like, the obedience, just follow through, even if it doesn't even make sense. And then leave room for God to work in that. In that case, it was by accident or chance that they messed up, and God provided that way. But I think God was going to provide that either way. But they got to see the power of God when they're just obedient to what He told them to do.
Yeah, so, there's I was thinking about one particular instance. I was back in Indiana. I can't remember what I was there for. Man, I was just going through a wilderness time, and there was this one particular time where I was in the town, and there's a place where I used to run at, and because believe it or not, I did run a lot when I was younger. And I was all the way across town, and I probably didn't have that much money. I probably, my gas tank was probably whatever. And he was like, hey, go over to the place where, man, I didn't want to go over there. I didn't want to go over there. I drove there, and I was like, I'm thinking to myself, are you sure? I mean, I don't want to go. I don't want to go here. I don't want to go here. There's nothing there, I get there, and I swear, as I'm pulling up, there's this gentleman that used to mentor me, and he's a truck driver, so you just never know where he's going to be at. And he was there at that park, And when I saw him, at first he was kind of like, he didn't probably recognize me, but when I saw him, I started to break down, because it was like God, He still remembered in my wilderness, in the things that I was going through. But, but we see as we, just like Bo said, we just have to obey, And when we see the Israelites, You know, the instruction was to obey. That way we can come back tomorrow and I'm gonna provide for you again. So we see God here providing in this miraculous way, and he's showing himself that he is God. When we look at our final verse here, can I get someone to read 17:1-6?
The entire Israelite community left the wilderness of sin, moving from one place to the next according to the Lord's command. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So the people complained to Moses, "Give us water to drink." "Why are you complaining to me?" Moses replied to them. "Why are you testing the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water and grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you ever bring us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What should I do with these people? In a little while they will stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take the staff you struck the Nile with in your hand and go. I'm going to stand there in front of you on the rock of Horeb. When you hit the rock, water will come out of it and the people will drink." Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel.
Okay, I know we're getting short on time, so I'm just gonna hit a high point here for this here. So we see them here continue to be here in the wilderness. There's one thing I want to point out here. Yeah, he's going to provide them to drink, but in verse 2 he says, "Why are you complaining to me? Why are you complaining to me?" And Moses replied to them, "Why are you testing the Lord?" So if we recognize that in 16 we see the Israelites grumbled, but here in this scenario here, the grumbling here is going to go to the next level, almost kind of like an accusatory, like we're bringing charges against you, Moses. Like, so their complaining is almost accusatory. It's almost like they're in anger. Okay, so we see a different type of complaining here, and Moses here confronts it. And he doesn't confront it because they offended him. Who are they offending? He goes, "Why are you testing the Lord? Why are you testing him?" And it's almost like he's telling them, man, y'all need to wake up, because what has he done? He's provided the quail. He's provided the bread. Okay? And now he's getting ready to provide the water. Okay? And again, we see him provide the water. Okay? And we see here Moses. I feel Moses here. I feel that Moses has this kind of, he's scared, but he also he's a little upset because of how the Israelites have responded to how God is revealing himself to them. They said, "Why did you ever bring us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and with these people?" That's what Moses says here. "What should I do with these people? In a little while, they're going to stone me." So even Moses here starts to doubt. Moses here is, the wilderness is starting to wear you down. Okay? We know that the wilderness can wear us down. We know that. We've all been through it. You think about our wilderness experience. Sometimes it can wear us down. Our family is going through another sickness. The ones in Arizona. And so we cry. We prayed yesterday for him. And sometimes you think, man, how can why has our family got to go through this again? Why? The sickness. So we see this wilderness. It's starting to affect not only Moses, but we see it affect the people of Israel. Okay, but God yet again goes beyond and provides for his people. Okay, even in the wilderness. Okay, he strikes this rock, right, and they're able to drink. And he says, "Take the staff you struck in the Nile with your hands, and you hit the rock. Water will come out of it, and the people will drink." And Moses did this in the sight of the elders. So they were all able to drink. So we see, we begin to see, we see God being who God is. But we also see how we can relate to the Israelites, we can relate to Moses in some of the things that he's going through. Like there's just a wearing down, but God yet, he shows up again. He's showing up here. So, and our last question is, in what ways have you seen God provide for you or someone you love? In what ways?
I remember you and D group and stuff praying for your son, and we prayed and prayed and you messaged us one day and you said, hey, like, he called me today and said, he got saved, and I mean that's pretty epic.
I could probably use Dylan for a lot of illustration. He's not only his transformation, but just how much he's taught me, through what he's done. So we see, we know that God's going to provide. Okay, we can anchor on to stories like this. Okay, we can anchor on story how God has provided for us in our, and how Him providing for us has built our faith. And so we see this. So as we go out this week, I just want you to think of a few points here to apply. One, God is able to provide for any need that we have. Any need that we have, He's able to provide. And we see this in this narrative, and I know that we've experienced this in our lives as well. Also, believers demonstrate faith when they trust in God and to provide anew each day. All right? We need God every single day. Okay? We need Him. We need His Word. We need His fellowship. We need the church. We need each other. And so we need that each and every day. And man, God will go to great lengths to show His care and provision for His people. He's going to go to great lengths, and we see this in this narrative. And I know we've experienced this in our lives. God has shown up. God will show up, okay? And he has showed up in our lives. Does anyone have anything to offer to?
I will say one is sometimes what you think you need, you don't. So sometimes that's why you feel like maybe God's not answering your prayers, because what you think you need, God sees the bigger picture and it's not in it for you. And then also, I know me and Gary talk about this sometimes, but I know for me, when I go days without reading my Bible or doing what I'm supposed to be doing and seeking God, my attitude and my mood show, and He sees it. And so we talked about that this morning, because I was really moody. And anyways, He's really good about getting up, and I'm not a morning person at all. And He gets up, and He's just been a really good leader in our household, and He gets up every morning and He reads His Bible, and He doesn't do it for a show. But our daughter's 5, and she told me the other day, she was like, Daddy reads his Bible every day. And she sees that. And I was like, well, I wonder what she's seeing in me other than my bad attitude and mood, because I haven't been making the time to, do what I need to do. So I don't know, it's just when you demonstrate your faith and do it every day, because you do need it every day.
It's funny because, Tulsa and I, we talk about that all the time too. It's just because I always tell Tulsa, man, I was like, I just want to pray like you, and she'll be like, well, I just kind of want to study like you, you know what I mean? And the thing is that especially Ashton and even the younger girls, they see that too, So it's funny because Ashton the other day was like, Grandma's praying, Grandma's praying. And so, and he tries to pray, and his prayers will probably only last about 2 seconds. He's off to doing something else. But But yeah, that's, man, you know, I'm a big proponent of reading the Bible. Like, you know, you ask Dylan, you know, and Dylan reads a lot too. Dylan reads a lot. But even in our conversation from what he had learned over the week, he was like, you know, I read, but man, I just want to apply. You know, that's where sometimes, you know, sometimes that's where we get disconnected. You know, yeah, we read, but you know, how do we apply? So, all right, I'll go ahead and lead us in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for you and just how you provide for us each and every day. It's you've revealed yourself in so many ways, not only through the Word but just in our lives. And I just ask you to give us the ability to take what you've done and allow us to be a witness to your work and be able to speak how you've shown up for us and to tell others and to spread your message of salvation. We just love and praise you. We're so grateful for this time of fellowship. We ask all this in your most powerful and your most holy name, the name of Jesus. Amen.